Tonight on Newsnight Scotland, Rangers is set to be liquidated. The Glasgow football giant has been in the throes of administration since February. Now the tax authorities have decided liquidation is the best option to try to get some of the money back for the public purse. So will the proposal to take over the club go ahead? And if it does, will Rangers have a league to play in? Good evening. Rangers Football Club is tonight facing a new chapter in its recent history of traumas. This Thursday, the club's creditors were scheduled to vote on an offer of a so-called company voluntary agreement, which would allow the club to emerge from administration. Today, the Revenue and Customs made clear they will vote against. That means Rangers face a new step into the financial unknown. Andrew Kerr reports.
The taxman has blown the whistle. Rangers will go into liquidation. A surprise for the man who's in the process of buying the club.
Why didn't HMRC say in March or April that they have a policy and this CVA would not be approved? And I just feel that there's been a huge amount of time, a huge amount of money wasted, and there is no financial case whatsoever that this can be the best route for getting money back for shareholders or for HMRC.
HMRC begged to differ though. Here's how we got here. It was St Valentine's Day when Rangers went into administration. Possible buyers appeared on the horizon and disappeared over the next few weeks. Bill Miller, the Blue Knights, and then of course Charles Green. Duff and Phelps issued an offer to creditors late last month for a pence in the pound deal, to which the taxman said no. Tonight they said their total debt was £95 million, including the big tax case. Interesting thinking has emerged from HMRC. In their statement this morning, a spokesman said, "A liquidation provides the best opportunity to protect taxpayers by allowing the potential investigation and pursuit of possible claims against those responsible for the company's financial affairs in recent years." A CVA restricts the scope of such action. So do they now begin to pursue the former owners, Craig White and Sir David Murray, other directors, and who else? HMRC are stamping their authority in this whole situation. Their attempts to clean up football finances in the past have been fairly unsuccessful. It now looks like they're getting tough on the people who run football clubs. They've told Newsnight Scotland they want to get the best return for taxpayers and think they can do better under liquidation. They've had their fingers burned in the past. We understand that in Portsmouth they were offered a certain amount under a CVA but ended up getting substantially less. HMRC say liquidators can, in all cases, investigate these possible offences. Gratuitous alienation, an asset sold for less than its value. Unfair preference, when someone's paid with the intention to make them better off after liquidation. And misfeasance. This covers a wide variety of breaches of duty by directors. HMRC are also keen to be on the side of fans, saying football will continue at Ibrox under a new company. Charles Green seems to have the clear go-ahead.
No, there's no avenue for anyone else to come in at this stage. That was the purpose of the deal that we did with Charles. I'd remind you that when we entered into the arrangements with Charles, not only was his offer on a CVA basis the best offer, his second offer being the fallback plan of the sale of business was the second best offer. And so from that point of view, we're content that we've got the best deal that we can get.
But on Twitter, it's clear fans feel they haven't had a good deal from the administrators.
Duff and Phelps should get their fees, although those fees do have to be authorised by the Court of Session. And the Court of Session has shown in the past that it is certainly very keen and very willing and able to reduce fees where it considers that excessive fees have been charged.
Lots of cash points to consider for Rangers 2012, and that's before you think about the football.
Well, I'm joined now by the insolvency practitioner Maureen Leslie of MLM Solutions. Maureen Leslie, first thing, will this sale to Charles Green still go ahead? Is that guaranteed?
I think it's highly likely that it will go ahead, Gordon.
This is him buying the assets of the company from a liquidator, effectively.
Yeah. The original proposal that the administrators issued way back in April to be approved at a meeting of creditors put forward exactly this scenario. And whilst HMRC amended a number of the proposals put forward by Duff and Phelps, crucially they did not amend that one. So I think that that dictates how the process will run. And from the information available to us, it certainly looks as though Charles Green has entered a binding and irrevocable agreement with Duff and Phelps.
OK, does that mean that the details of the proposals that were in the CVA document go ahead? For example, there was to be a cut-off date where sales of players, the funds would go to the CVA stroke new company rather than to the creditors. I think season ticket funds came into that. Will that now be set in concrete, or is that open to challenge?
I think that's a bit more open to challenge, Gordon. That seems to me, on a reading of the document, to attach to a deal which envisaged a CVA. And if that CVA is no longer on the table, it strikes me that those terms are no longer applicable.
Right, OK. What happens to the existing shareholders? If the club is... Are they wiped out?
Yes, they are. The company will be wound up. Essentially, there's no value to its shares.
And what about this floating charge over the assets that Craig White supposedly has that we keep hearing about?
I think there's no doubt he does. There seemed to be a quite validly assigned floating charge assigned by the Bank of Scotland to Craig White's company. That seems to be unchallengeable. However, it would appear that Craig White didn't actually advance any funds. The money that went forward would appear to have come from Ticketus. Therefore, that floating charge doesn't actually secure anything. There's no money, no value attached to it.
So just, sorry, make very simple terms, that means what? That means he doesn't actually have... He doesn't stand to gain from this?
He does not, no.
Right, OK. So the shareholders are wiped out if the company goes into liquidation. Craig White as a shareholder is wiped out. He also doesn't have the floating charge. Now, what about this claim we heard there from Charles Green, that it's very unfair for HMRC to come out with this policy now? Is it? I mean, after all, I remember doing an interview with you weeks ago where you pointed out that the HMRC have an official and indeed a written policy on these things. That's
correct. I don't understand why there's any doubt about that. It's available for anyone that wanted to look for it. And whether or not it's unfair, I do think that there may be an argument that a CVA would have produced a better financial outcome for the creditors of Rangers Football Club. But there is, as we've mentioned before, a massive public interest argument. In this particular case, we have a corporate entity which withheld PAYE for an extended period and used it for working capital. Now, if HMRC were to have voted in favour of a pence in the pound deal on that basis, then surely that sends a message to a number of other corporate entities that it's quite acceptable to withhold tax.
Everyone would think, oh, I've got a good idea to get through the recession. Let's not pay any tax for a year and then just pay 10p in the pound.
Precisely.
Right. Now, it's quite interesting, isn't it, that HMRC, having been rather silent recently, the politics of this with a small p, they seem to be quite clearly saying, look, the club can continue in some form or other. We've got no problem with that. We don't consider the fans are responsible for this. The people we think are responsible for this, we want to get in the public interest. There's this technical thing, isn't there, that a CVA would not allow anyone to investigate the behaviour of past directors, but a liquidator can.
Yes.
Just explain how that works.
With a CVA, essentially, one of the key features of a CVA is that the existing directors and shareholders remain in control of the company, where in a liquidation, that's not the case. The company is wound up and a liquidator has powers then to investigate the conduct.
And of course, the people who were coming in, it's not Duff and Phelps. Duff and Phelps wanted to be the liquidators. That's been overturned. It's this company, BDO. Now, if they can investigate what? They can investigate Craig White, presumably?
Yes.
David Murray? Who else?
They can investigate anyone who was a director at the date of the appointment of the administrators and anyone who was a director in the 3 years prior to that. Now, I think that would take in even David Murray. I think he resigned in 2009, August 2009. So a period of his directorship would come under scrutiny.
And what can they do? Can they come up and can they say, you lost the club money and we want the money back?
Yes, they can. Your reporter highlighted a number of challenges that can be brought where they think that assets were sold at undervalue, or where they think there's been some misfeasance or misconduct on the part of company directors.
But we're talking possible and potential civil actions here.
They're all civil actions, Gordon, yes.
Right, but just final point to be clear, it would appear, in my reading of it, that it's that power of investigation that HMRC wants, it claims, in the public interest. It's clearly, it's not that interested in what pennies and the pounds it gets back under the CVA rules. It wants the power to investigate this and get to the bottom of it.
I think so. And I think there's a clear suggestion from HMRC that they do want to clean up corporate governance in football.
All right, Maureen Leslie, thank you very much indeed. Now, the purely football consequences of liquidation are unclear. Rangers fans may cherish dreams of playing in Europe once again, but as things stand, they may have trouble gaining admittance to the Scottish Premier League. The one thing we do know is that there will be no European football at Ibrox for the next 3 years. Rangers already had a 1-year ban after entering administration, extended now to 3 years under UEFA rules for clubs that suffer a liquidation and don't have 3 years of audited accounts. And that, frankly, is the only certainty. The biggest uncertainty is this: will a new football club be allowed to continue in the Scottish Premier League? To do so would require 2/3 of the existing clubs, 8 out of the 12, to approve a new application. So expect lots of coverage over the next few days about the voting intentions of club chairmen. Frankly, it's anyone's guess how that will turn out. This situation is without precedent in Scottish football. Which leaves the fans, remember them. Charles Green has urged them to renew or buy season tickets. Little wonder, given the almost £20 million this could raise in cash, and quickly. But why would or should they? To compete in what league? Against whom? And investing in what exactly? As ever with this saga, where do you even begin? I'm joined now by Richard Wilson of the Herald newspaper sports staff and by the Rangers fan and blogger Chris Graham. Chris Graham, what's the reaction among the fans to this? I mean, is there any great confidence that this Charles Green thing will now save the club?
Disappointment that the CVA hasn't been agreed, I think, initially. Obviously, we always knew that there was a possibility that that would happen. It was probably at best 50-50 and possibly even less than that in hindsight. I think that we always knew that a new co was a possibility. It's disappointing that we've had to take that route, and it remains to be seen whether, exactly what the implications of that are going to be. Well,
do you have faith in this proposed new deal?
Well, if Charles Green is actually definitely going to take over the club, which it certainly seems as if he is, then there's a lot of challenges to be overcome in terms of SPL entry, and there's still obviously the SFA investigation outstanding. So it's difficult to say exactly what's going to happen at the moment, but we certainly hope that the new co would continue on in the SPL.
Not the least of the problems, Richard Wilson, being that these are a couple of pages from the original offer document, which included either a CVA or a sale of the assets. And one of the conditions of Charles Green's proposals is that Rangers stays in all the competitions and all the leagues that it's presently a member of. So potentially he could walk away from this.
Well, yeah, but I think that applies to the CVA rather than UCO.
No, it doesn't. It seems to apply. I'll read you what it says. It says, Sefco, this is his company, granted exclusivity to complete a takeover of the company or a purchase of the company's business and assets.
Right. Well, I think the reality is that this was the decision that nobody in Scottish football wanted, and I think some time ago you would have been confident enough to say a new co-Rangers would end up in the SPL. I don't think it's as straightforward as that, but I think the intelligence around the game at the moment and the gut feeling around the game at the moment is that Rangers would probably end up back in the SPL. So it's maybe from his point of view a gamble worth taking, I think.
What's your feel for it? Do you think that, I mean, as I understand it, the people who run the clubs who are in the SPL at the moment have to have a vote in that?
Yes, there's 12. All 12 clubs will have a vote, including Rangers, and it's an 8-4 majority. That's what they require. So it needs 5 clubs to say no. A lot of clubs have recently, the chairman of some clubs have said in recent months, or in recent weeks I should say, they're not happy with the idea of a new co-Rangers, they're not comfortable with the idea of voting for it. But the reality is different when they come to face that decision. They have financial imperatives of their own. There is a move among supporters of these clubs to not want Rangers back in. So there is financial pressures on both sides, but I think enough chairman will make a decision
also,
for
presumably, if Rangers went back into the SPL, I don't know, clubs in the lower leagues who perhaps would have got promoted could say, well, hang on a second, what's going on here?
Yeah, but I don't think there's any recourse for them to do anything about it. I mean, it's a far from ideal situation, and the reality is, whatever decision anybody makes, if the SPL decide they don't want Rangers in, Rangers end up in the 3rd division. That's not ideal for the clubs that are left behind. So, I mean, this is a lose-lose situation for all of these chairmen. None of them want to be in this position. They were all hoping that there'd be a way around this, but this is the decision that they have to make, and I think they will end up putting Rangers back
Chris
in.
Graham, it's presumably, there's a feeling amongst you guys that this is lose-lose as well. I mean, obviously fans of other clubs will top their own boot, but the fact is, I mean, if you have a Rangers Newco which goes back into the SPL, and everybody knows that millions of pounds of money have not been paid to the public purse that should have been paid. I mean, even leaving aside this big tax case, which we don't know about yet, it doesn't exactly do the image of either Rangers or Scottish football much good, does it?
Well, I think Rangers have already been punished quite severely for everything that's happened. I mean, there have been footballing sanctions. There obviously are now financial penalties by not achieving the CVA. I think the biggest point of view from the Rangers fans that I've seen today is that we would prefer, obviously, to continue in the SPL, but if the SPL chairman feel that the only way that they can let the club back in is by imposing essentially ad hoc sanctions, which there are none at the moment, so they would have to make them up. If that's the only way that we get back into the SPL, and if those sanctions involve, for example, points penalties or financial penalties from prize money, etc., I think most of the fans that I've seen today have been saying that they would prefer to start in Division 3.
Really?
I know that commercially that's
just with no stain, this is us.
Well, I mean,
we go.
I don't see it's not a moral argument. I mean, it's really just from the point of view of why would we want to be in the SPL with. I mean, obviously there's a commercial argument for being in the SPL, but if that's potentially removed by reduction in prize money, etc.
Okay,
so.
Briefly, I mean, Charles Green is saying to people, buy season tickets. Will you and your co-supporters buy season tickets when you don't quite know? Well, as you just outlined, you don't know what you're buying tickets to see.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure that the fans will buy season tickets. I think we've got until the start of July as the deadline for actually putting renewals in, and obviously beyond that, season tickets can still be bought in any case. I think certainly a lot of fans.
But they
will,
want the money in now, don't they?
Well, they may want the money in now. I think a lot of people will wait till the last minute to see exactly what happens over the next few weeks.
All right, we'll have to leave it there. Thank you both very much indeed. Very quickly looking for the front pages. Starting with the Scottish Daily Mail, there it is. Rangers, now it's all over, it says. The Telegraph leads on Jeremy Hunt. Coalition at war over Hunt and B-Sky B, it says. And The Guardian leads on Syria. Russia accused, it says. That's it. I'll be back tomorrow. Good night.